Lillian, let me start with Sicily, a city where lemons smell warmer than promises. I flew in as a translator. One day, a few panels, not a single dramatic note. The conference room was buzzing like a beehive, and I was nervous only about deadlines, not fate. While I was waiting for my badge, a man with attentive eyes looked up. Ivan, he introduced himself, squeezed my hand, and in that squeeze something clicked, like a lock suddenly coming to a key. We exchanged polite phrases in English, but I accidentally answered in Russian. He smiled, as if he heard a musical response. I explained, I was born in the United States, but moved to Israel as a child. The languages for me were like different shores of the same sea. He said he had flown in from Kiev to negotiate the supply of equipment. There was fatigue and hope in his voice. When the moderator called us into the hall, Ivan half-jokingly suggested that we have coffee by the port after the speeches. Just 10 minutes, I promised. I didn't know that these minutes would swallow up years. And most importantly, that we wouldn't have time for the simplest thing. We met at a bar over the water, where the glasses clinked more softly than the waves. I talked about synchronicities, he about sleepless nights and risks. Suddenly the world narrowed to a table, 2 cups, and gazes that wouldn't look away. He laughed softly, as if he were afraid of scaring off something good. I felt that there was a person nearby who could listen to more than just words. I was about to say, I'll write down your number, when messages from the organizer flooded my phone, urgent papers, a changed program, a photo shoot. Just a minute, I pointed at him with my fingers. The papers turned out to be endless. I turned back, the table was empty. I went out to the port, only traces of rain on the tiles. I looked around the hall, the lobby, the stairs to the embankment. Ivan seemed to dissolve into the evening. When I realized that I had missed the moment, something cracked in my chest. I repeated the name in my head, looking for a silhouette out of the corner of my eye. But even the intoxicating city didn't show the way. And then fate made a move I hadn't heard of. The next morning I flew to Tel Aviv, clutching my suitcase as if it contained an unproven word. In the parking lot, my mother said, guests will be coming this evening. In our family, guests often meant a road with no right-of-way. That's how I met Daniel, polite, correct, with a love of stability. There was no Sicily in him, there was a plain without sunrise or sunset. It was easy to talk to him, but my heart didn't respond. Families came to an agreement faster than I dared to think. I convinced myself, gratitude would come, then habit, and then, look, love. Security is also a feeling, my aunt would say, pouring tea. I was silent, keeping the thought of the man from the port in a drawer. When Daniel proposed, I nodded, gently, politely, without fireworks. I wanted to believe that fate wouldn't be offended by my caution. But at night the smell of the sea came through the window. I closed my eyes and agreed. You know, Lillian, sometimes yes sounds the loudest in silence. And yet the silence itself screamed. The wedding was bright, children's laughter, relatives dancing, the sweet noise of wishes. I memorized the correct gestures of gratitude, measured smiles like dresses, and with each passing minute tried to love this new name next to my own. In the fall, Noam was born, my heart in my little hands. I taught him 2 languages of fairy tales and 1 language of safety. Daniel took care of us conscientiously, he ordered diaper deliveries, repaired shelves, wrote lists. But there was an invisible table of silence between us. I cleaned the kitchen, and it seemed to me that grains of sand from the Italian coast were flying off the countertop. One day Daniel said that he was getting tired faster than before. Work, he shrugged. But at night I heard his cough and couldn't fall asleep until dawn. We took tests. The doctors drove me around in circles for a long time, as if they didn't want to offend reality. When the word cancer was spoken, there was too much air in the room. I hugged Noam and said to myself, now love is an action, not a feeling. And with that action, the ordeal began. Hospital corridors have their own geography, hope on the right wing, despair on the left, silence in the middle. Daniel had lost weight, as if someone had erased his outline with a pencil. I stood by him, held his hand, signed the permits, learned to organize the pills by day. I'm ashamed to admit it, Lillian, but sometimes I searched for love within myself, and didn't find it. There was compassion, duty, gratitude, fear, everything but fire. I prayed for at least a spark. Meanwhile, Noam asked when Dad would build him a pillow fort again. I came up with answers that fell somewhere between soon and I don't know. One night, Daniel whispered, "Thank you for holding on." I felt something tremble inside me, but the test was not waiting. The doctor announced deadlines, as short as a breath. I fell silent, gathered my documents, and ironed my shirts for the last few visits. When the sun rose, it was no longer warm. In the evening, Daniel fell asleep under the drip. And for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to think about the other hand. And I knew that the thought would punish me for it. Daniel left quietly, like a door that closes carefully so as not to wake up the house. I stood over the laundry on the line and thought about how to remove the things of a person who would never return. There was no cry in my heart, only a boundless, dry emptiness. Noam asked, "Is Dad in the hospital forever now?" I said, "Dad is in my memories now," and I felt the words cutting into my throat. During the day I studied expense accounting, at night I studied silence. When I was running low, I opened my laptop and typed Ivan Sicily conference into the search box. The algorithms responded with silence. I looked at the photos from the panels, stopped at unfamiliar profiles, zoomed in on frames of ports. There are millions of Ivans in the world, I thought, and didn't stop. You know, sometimes despair is just stubbornness that is tired of disguising itself. Several years passed. I learned to raise Noam on my own, but I felt like one country inside me was becoming too small. And then I made a decision that seemed too bold. But when else? America greeted us with the accent of rain on the windowsill and the smell of coffee that brings strength. Boston became a new horizon that had to be mastered. I worked as a translator at an agency, laying out my days in sober piles, and at night studying laws and school systems. Noam was growing up, English dancing on his tongue like a light breeze. I felt a freedom unusual, a little scary, but honest. I almost didn't think about Ivan, I learned to put his name in the deepest pocket of my heart. One rainy evening, I ran into a coffee shop to wait out the downpour. The window was glistening with drops, the barista turned on the music quieter than silence. Somewhere to the side, someone laughed, and this laughter cut through the air like a familiar note from a long-forgotten song. I looked up. A man stood by the door with a folder of documents, a light gray hair on his temples, the same look I remembered. I took a deep breath, as if for the first time in years. It can't be him, I said to myself. But who else could be laughing like that? He turned his head, and our eyes met, like two trains that had finally arrived at the same platform. The phone slipped from his hand, hanging on the headphone wire. "Mia," he said in a voice that had grown up with me. I nodded, afraid that the word would break this fragile reality. The downpour outside the window was dying down, but inside everything was thundering. We sat down at a corner table. He told me that after Sicily he had been looking for me everywhere, writing to the organizers, translation agencies, colleagues. "At some point I thought I was making you up," he smiled bitterly. I answered the truth, I was married off, a son was born, my husband died. It sounded like I was retelling someone else's film. Ivan kept quiet correctly, not feeling sorry for me, not condemning my youth, he simply held my gaze. For the first time in many years I felt that I was being seen whole. "We've wasted time," he whispered. I nodded. But we met just when there was no need to run away. The question hung between us, would we have the courage? I had to check whether my life could accommodate two events, the return of feelings and the safety of my son. The following Sunday, the three of us met in the park. Ivan spoke to Noam in English and broken Hebrew, made him laugh with unsuccessful sayings, listened as attentively as he had listened to me in Palermo. A window opened inside me, peace blew in from there. In the evening, Noam quietly asked, "Mom, is he good?" "Yes," I answered, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of this yes. We began to see each other more often: cafes, walks, small restaurants where tables whisper secrets. Ivan told me how he built a business from crumbs and mistakes, how I was learning not to apologize for my desires. One day he touched my hand and whispered, "I don't want to lose you again." It wasn't a confession, it was a promise. And yet that same evening, the phone with the code +972 rang. I knew, the past, like the sea, always returns. Daniel's sister was on the line. Her voice was sharper than knives. I, a widow, must maintain my honor, not meet a man. She spoke of memory, tradition, shame. I listened, moving the receiver away from my ear so as not to fall apart. After the call, letters. Hints of a possible custody battle if Noam's life was influenced by strangers. I felt a cold wave of fear return. I told Ivan. He clenched his jaws, "We will protect you." I had never heard such firmness in him. "You have the right to love," he added. "And your son needs a happy mother, not a holy shadow." His words sounded bolder than I had imagined. We made an appointment with a lawyer. I gathered documents, diplomas, certificates, as if I were building a house out of paper. At night, sitting by Noam's bed, I wondered, could my heart withstand another war? The morning brought a sealed answer. That answer pleased me, and scared me. The lawyer listened carefully and calmly laid out the map. "Custody is mine, the law is on my side, there are no legal grounds to take the child away from relatives. But moral pressure is possible," he said. He taught me to document contacts, not to succumb to provocations, and asked me to communicate only in writing. We went outside, and Boston felt lighter. Ivan bought Noam ice cream, and for himself silence, which contained support. But news came from Israel. Relatives were buying tickets to visit us. "They want to see their grandson more often," wrote the mother-in-law. I agreed to meet in public places, with a short time, with my presence. Ivan suggested not showing my address. I understood, we are not just building relationships, we are building a fortress. Fortresses, however, are tested by siege. The first visit brought souvenirs, heavy looks, and cold remarks. The second, Noam's tears after the car. The third was an ultimatum. I responded with silence. And at night I wrote another letter. I invited mediation, a neutral place, rules, respect. The relatives were indignant at first, but they came. We talked about the right of a child to be a child, not a flag in someone else's war. I held my wrist so as not to tremble. Ivan sat next to me, saying almost nothing, but his presence pulled me together. We came to an agreement: short meetings once every 2 weeks, no threats, no assessments of my personal life. It turned out beautifully on paper. In life, it was more complicated. After each visit, Noam became quieter, as if choosing who to love more correctly. Then Ivan suggested that we make pizza together. They kneaded the dough, laughed at the crooked circles, and for the first time I saw laughter appear in our house, not cautious, but real. I thought, maybe it's time to say out loud what we both know. My fingers touched his hand. The doorbell rang. The past was standing at the doorstep again, and this time it didn't come with flowers. The relatives showed up without warning, on the way from the airport. I explained that the meetings were on schedule, reminded them of the agreements. They demanded to be let into the apartment, they wanted to talk to Noam alone. I politely but firmly refused. In response, I heard insults. Ivan stood between us, a calm voice, no steps forward, only firm boundaries. After they left, I shook as if seismic waves had started under my feet again. "We're hiring a lawyer for an official prescription," Ivan said. I nodded. That night, he stayed on the couch, not as a hero, but as an ordinary support holding up the ceiling. In the morning, he made tea and quietly asked, "Mia, what are you most afraid of?" "That we'll lose each other again," I replied. He smiled as if he already had a plan against losses. "Then we won't let go." Easy to say, you might say. But sometimes the right things start with simple words. We started. The prescription set clear boundaries: and the tension subsided just enough for us to breathe. I went back to work, Ivan to his business, but in the evenings we learned to be us. This is not a science from books: who cooks dinner, who listens to school stories, who admits that he is tired and angry, but is still there. One day I asked, "What do you regret the most?" "About lost time," he replied. I understood. We are both standing on the shore, from which we have long been afraid to jump. He took my hand and said, "I love you, Mia." The world became quiet, like before the rain. I wanted to answer, but I was afraid to say a word after which there is no going back. "Give me the night," I whispered. He nodded. That same night, a message came from the family lawyer: "We are considering the court." The mutual breath stopped. I looked out the window and decided it was time to learn to speak louder than fear. I called Ivan at 3 in the morning. "I love you," I said as if I were holding onto a railing in the dark. There was silence on the other side of the wire, warm, not frightened. "Then we'll hold on," he replied. We gathered documents, teacher testimonials, medical records, everything that could protect Noam's world. Ivan suggested media silence: no posts, no comments, just facts and official letters. I agreed. However, my relatives started a rumor campaign: I'd betrayed my memory, changed the faith in my heart, chose a stranger. I read these words and felt resentment rising inside me, not for myself, for my right to live. Ivan held me by the shoulders: "You don't have to justify yourself." But I decided to say it. Not to them, to myself. The next day I recorded a video. No tears, no pathos. Just the truth. As I pressed publish, I knew, now we're not just a couple. We are a team. And a team either wins or learns. The video went viral like an unaddressed postcard that still finds its addressee. The comments were full of everything from support to stones. But most importantly, I felt like I was no longer hiding. "Your voice is you," Ivan said, and prepared a pasta dinner as if we were already in Sicily. The next morning, the summons came: court in 3 weeks. The lawyer advised us to focus on routine, work, school, a steady rhythm, no sudden movements. We lived with small things, and they were what kept us going. Noam began teaching Ivan Hebrew words, they laughed at the wrong accents, and it became easier to breathe in the house. On the eve of the meeting, I opened my closet and took out the cream blouse in which I had once held the microphone at a conference. "This time, I too will translate," I thought aloud, "only my own feelings into the language of facts." Ivan nodded. "We will tell the truth," he added. And the truth has a strange property: it is not always gentle, but it is always accurate. The first day of the trial, cold benches, hot looks. Daniel's relatives talked about traditions and grief, as if they were coins with which to pay for my son's future. Our lawyer calmly presented the facts: my custody, stable education, psychological conclusions, that Noam feels safe with me and Ivan by his side. Ivan gave brief testimony: business history, no criminal record, supporting the child. No heroism, just adult responsibility. When I was asked to speak, my knees trembled treacherously. I spoke about the right not to live in the shadows, about the fact that loyalty to memory does not exclude loyalty to oneself. The judge listened attentively, sometimes taking notes. After the break, my opponents showed printouts of comments from my video. I was not embarrassed: these are the thoughts of strangers. And in front of you is the life of a specific child. In the hallway, Ivan handed me water. "You were strong," he said. I replied, "We were." The verdict was postponed until next week. Waiting is always harder than talking. The week dragged on like a shadow. We worked, cooked dinner, checked homework, learned to laugh, even when there was little laughter. Ivan brought a small lamp in the shape of a ship from the workshop. "So that there is always light in our bay," he explained to Noam. On Friday we walked along the embankment. The rain stopped, and the city suddenly became transparent. "Mom, if the judge says I can't see Ivan, will we still be friends?" Noam asked. I stopped and hugged him. "We will be a family, despite all the words on paper." He smiled and pulled us to the hot chocolate stand. In the evening, I made soup and thought about the strange arithmetic: from fear and love sometimes comes courage. Before going to bed, Ivan whispered, "No matter what, we are together." I nodded, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. But this morning a letter arrived with a new surprise, and this surprise could complicate everything. The opponents filed a motion for temporary restrictions on contact with third parties, a legal hack for our weekend. The lawyer responded quickly: a retraction, a link to psychological reports, a chart of Noam's stable assessments. "We'll manage," he said. At the hearing, the judge, tapping his pen, asked me, "Why do you think Mr. Ivan's presence is beneficial for the child?" I told him about chess on the weekends, pizza together, skateboard repairs, and laughter that had returned to the house. "Stability is not just walls," I added. "It's those who breathe within them together." The judge looked up and nodded. The motion was denied. After the hearing, we went out into the light rain. Ivan didn't say a single loud word, he just gave me my jacket because I had forgotten mine. And I realized that sometimes love is a jacket at the right time. We waited for the final decision. In the meantime, we returned home and the three of us put together a puzzle with a lighthouse. It seemed symbolic to me, right? The final hearing was shorter than we thought. The judge read, "Custody remains with me. Daniel's family has the right to structured meetings without interference in their private lives. No restrictions on Ivan's presence." The words fell like pebbles into water, dispersing in warm circles. I felt an invisible backpack fall from my shoulders. In the hallway, we hugged, not for show, not victoriously, but gratefully. The relatives passed by with stern faces. I wished them peace in my heart and believed in this wish myself. In the evening, we cooked pasta al limone and turned on Italian music. Noam danced funny. Ivan laughed the way people laugh when it's okay to laugh. I raised my glass and thought, we didn't win the battle. We learned to live. When everyone fell asleep, I opened the window. The night smelled of rain and a new page. And then it occurred to me, what if we could bring back what started it all? "Let's go to Sicily," I said in the morning. Ivan raised his eyebrows, but there was no doubt in his eyes. He turned down a few meetings. I agreed to work remotely. We planned the vacation so that Noam wouldn't miss important classes. The journey turned out to be easy, as if the countries themselves wanted us to touch the shore where we had once parted ways. Palermo greeted us with a market that smelled of fresh fish and pepper and a sea that never repeats itself. We walked to the port. "This is where you disappeared," I said, laughing and almost crying. Ivan sighed. "This is where I learned that you have to share contacts immediately." Noam moved between us, memorizing the city that glows from within. In the evening, we sat down in the same bar, or a very similar one. Ivan ordered 3 espressos and pulled a small box from his pocket. I felt the earth take a step towards the sky. "I've been looking for the right words for a long time," Ivan said, "but the right words are actions." In the box lay a ring, simple, like our honest story. "Do you want to walk side by side officially, without fear, without closed doors?" I looked at the sea, at my son, who measured the waves with his steps, at the man I love in 2 languages. "Yes," I answered without a pause. This yes was completely different from the old one. Now it had roots and wings at the same time. We didn't plan a big celebration. We decided to sign the documents in Boston, inviting a few close friends. But I wanted to take one more step, tell our story to someone who knows how to listen with our hearts. "Lillian Hart is preparing a series of interviews about love and courage," I said, showing the news on my phone. Ivan smiled. "Tell her everything." I nodded. Because sometimes stories are needed not to surprise, but to heal. I just didn't know where to start. "Lillian, you listen," and the words come together. "I am Mia. I am learning to call things by their proper names as I tell you how it all began in Sicily, a casual coffee, Ivan's gaze that never let go of me even after years. Then a marriage that never became love, long hospital corridors, the silence after a loss that is heavier than a scream. I tell you how the rain in Boston gave me my breath back and brought me to the same coffee shop where Ivan and I met again. How we learned not to hide, everyday life that became a family, resisting other people's demands, the courtroom where I first spoke the truth without apology. You clarify gently, when did you realize you were home? When I saw Noam smile, without fear, without permission, I answer. What held you back? His hand by my side and my new right to a voice. You nod, continue. That's exactly what I do, laying out the events in front of you like stepping stones. And at that moment, the phone vibrates, from your mother-in-law, a short message, we need to talk. This is important. I show you the screen. You ask with your eyes, ready? I inhale, and I know that the next turn has already begun. Ivan and I took Noam to a small municipal garden, where volunteers plant trees to commemorate important events. We chose a young lemon tree, a reminder of Sicily and how bitterness turns into taste. Noam hung a sign, our new beginning. I laughed through my tears. Life wasn't perfect, deadlines, renovations at neighbors, fatigue after meetings, missed buses, all of this was ours too. But now there was a light in the house that wouldn't be turned off by other people's demands. In the evening, I wrote a letter to Daniel's family, thanked them for the memories we shared, invited them to a meeting without pretensions, just for the sake of a boy who wants to see love different but real. The answer came briefly, let's try. I put the phone on the table and felt a quiet relief. Before going to bed, Ivan asked, what do you dream about for the next 5 years? I smiled, about ordinary mornings. And then I added another, completely unusual dream. I dream of returning to Palermo 3 times and showing Noam the bar over the water, where the story that knows how to wait began. We arrived the following summer. The sea was breathing smoothly, like a child who finally sleeps without fear. I placed 3 cups of espresso on the same marble table and said, this time, the contacts are already there. We laughed, and our laughter seemed to be integrated into the sound of the waves. I looked at Ivan and understood, love does not bring back the past, it creates the present. And the present is us, who chose each other not by chance, but consciously. When the sun slipped into the sea, I whispered, thank you for not disappearing completely then. He replied, thank you for not being silent today. Noam tossed a lemon into the air and caught it with a laugh. I thought that the hooks of stories are different, sometimes it's an unexpected turn, sometimes it's a simple we're here. And sometimes there is silence in which you can clearly hear, from now on, only together.